Hi! Today I'll present a comprehensive framework for managing sub-tier supplier risk in semiconductor supply chains, especially for high-mix, low-volume environments where traditional spend-based approaches fall short. This framework addresses how to build visibility, governance, and resilience across Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers. The goal is to show that sub-tier supplier risk must be governed proactively even without direct contractual relationships. My name is Farine. I am a supply chain professional, passionate in helping supply chain professionals work smarter with AI. Please do check out my LinkedIn profile and my other YouTube videos. Let me start with why this matters. The semiconductor supply chain is one of the most globally dispersed and interdependent networks in existence, crossing over 70 borders. Research shows that more than one-third of supply disruptions originate beyond Tier 1, in the deeper tiers that most companies cannot see. In a high-mix, low-volume environment, this risk is amplified because each product may rely on unique bill of materials with limited sourcing leverage and qualification cycles that can take months or years. The combination of complexity, concentration, and long qualification times makes sub-tier risk management accidental. Here's our roadmap. We will cover 8 interconnected areas, starting with the foundation of multi-tier mapping, moving through criticality segmentation and governance, then into risk response playbooks, resilience strategies, digital enablers, and finally, how to measure maturity and success through KPIs. Each section builds on the previous one to form a complete operating model for managing Tier 2 and Tier 3 supplier risks. Every supply chain hides a few golden screws, those tiny components that can stop production. The first step is to identify them. Work with engineering and product teams to spot parts that they are single source, have long lead times, or face extreme volatility. Next, make Tier 2 transparency non-negotiable. Update contracts and QBRs so Tier 1 suppliers must review who makes those critical parts and where. When you do, you turn a mountain of 10,000 parts into a focused watch list of 50 high-risk Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers. And that's how visibility becomes resilience. Supply chains are too complex for static spreadsheets. The next step is automation. Use AI with knowledge graphs and LLMs to autonomously map deep tier relationships and expose hidden dependencies. Then, build a digital twin. Run a what-if scenarios like a Tier 3 port shutdown or a Tier 4 raw material shortage, and quantify the blast radius before it happens. Finally, embed end-to-end traceability. Track critical raw materials from mine to fab to manage ESG compliance and geopolitical risks. This is how supply chains move from reactive spreadsheets to vigilant maps that anticipate disruption. Here is what good like in practice. Your mapping should cover these 5 priority categories, each representing areas where disruption creates outsized impact. The mapping cadence should be quarterly at minimum, with ad hoc updates triggered by events. You must explicitly mark single source nodes, long qualification flows, and shared upstream dependencies. And here's a non-negotiable rule. If requalification time exceeds 6 months, that supplier relationship must be mapped, no exceptions. This rule alone will dramatically improve your sub-tier visibility. This is a critical mindset shift. In semiconductors, spend does not equal risk. A low-spend specialty gas supplier can shut down your entire fab. So, we segment Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers by impact, not spend. Strategic nodes are your highest risk suppliers, single or dual source, locked in by technology with qualification cycles measured in months or years. Operationally critical suppliers have regional or capacity risk but can be substituted. Standard suppliers have multiple sources and short requalification. Monitor only those that are commoditized and low impact. This 4-tier model ensures governance resources are concentrated where they matter most. When evaluating whether a Tier 2 or Tier 3 supplier falls in the segmentation model, these 7 criteria form the lens. Requalification lead time is often the most critical. If it takes more than 18 months to qualify an alternative, that supplier is strategic by definition regardless of spend. Technology uniqueness, capacity rigidity, and geographic exposure add further dimensions. Shared dependency is often overlooked. When multiple Tier 1 suppliers depend on the same Tier 3, your risk is correlated even if your Tier 1 portfolio looks diversified. Finally, EOL exposure and financial resilience round out the picture, especially for SME suppliers who may lack the balance sheet to weather extended downturns. Governance is where visibility turns into action. The core principle is simple but powerful. Tier 2, Tier 3 risks must be governed even if they are not contracted. The Governance Council is chaired by supply chain or procurement leadership with cross-functional representation spanning engineering, operations, compliance, finance, and service. This is not a procurement-only exercise. Every function has skin in the game. The Council's four key responsibilities are approving critical classifications, reviewing systemic risks, resolving cross-business trade-offs, and approving mitigation investments such as buffer stock, qualification programs, or tooling. Clear ownership is essential for effective governance. This RACI matrix defines who owns each governance activity and who supports. Notice that ownership is distributed across functions. Procurement owns the mapping, but engineering owns technology risk. Materials planning owns capacity and EOL risk, and compliance owns ESG. This prevents procurement from becoming a bottleneck and ensures that domain expertise drives each risk dimension. The Governance Council collectively owns the escalation path to executive leadership when issues exceed functional authority. This is one of the most important concepts in sub-tier management. How do you govern suppliers you do not have contracts with? The answer is influence without contract. Through your Tier 1 suppliers, you can conduct joint risk reviews, share roll-up demand forecasts to reduce the bullwhip effect, align on technology roadmaps, establish executive escalation paths for crisis situations, and co-fund risk mitigation such as tooling investments or MPI support. The critical boundary is clear and non-negotiable. No direct price negotiation with Tier 2, Tier 3 unless formally approved by the Governance Council. This protects the Tier 1 relationship while extending your risk management reach. Every identified risk needs a predefined response, not an ad hoc reaction. This playbook maps the 6 most common Tier 2, Tier 3 risk types to their standard mitigation strategies. Single source risks are addressed through dual qualification and design alternates, though in semiconductors, qualifications can take 12 to 18 months, so this must start early. Don't wait for a crisis. Fund a dedicated engineering project to qualify a second source for your top 10 golden screws. The ROI of preventing one lie-down event pays for the program tenfold. Capacity risks require long-term agreements. EOL exposure demands early last-time buy decisions and repair strategies. Financial fragility in SME suppliers can be stabilized through shorter payment cycles negotiated via the Tier 1. Geopolitical risks require geographic diversification and strategy buffers, and ESG violations must follow a clear remediation or exit path with defined timelines. Not every risk follows the standard review cycle. These 5 triggers require immediate escalation to the Governance Council, no waiting for the next quarterly review. If requalification exceeds 12 months and there is no approved alternate, you have a critical exposure window. Tier 3 bankruptcy or shutdown risk can cascade rapidly. Export controls or sanctions can make sourcing illegal overnight. Site-specific disaster, power outages, water shortages, floods can take facilities offline for weeks. And an EOL announcement without an approved transition plan means you are on the clock. The governance framework must have a fast lane for these situations. COVID-19 and geopolitics expose the fragility of just-in-time in semiconductors. Resilience requires 4 strategic sourcing shifts. First, strategic buffers for truly irreplaceable inputs. You cannot dual source EUV optics overnight, so holding strategic inventory is essential. For low-cost, high-risk items like a 2-cent connector, holding 6 to 12 months of inventory is a cheap insurance policy. Analyze the cost of carry versus the cost of stoppage. Second, Dual sourcing that is genuine independent. You must verify that your second source does not rely on the same upstream Tier 3 supplier. Otherwise, your diversification is useless. Third, long-term agreements for capacity assurance, not just pricing. Lastly, reducing lead times at bottleneck tiers can provide an order of magnitude improvement in the bullwhip effect and overall supply chain stability. We must upgrade our supplier relationships. Resilience requires allies, not just vendors. First, we segment. We map suppliers by their operational importance versus their maturity, so we know exactly where to focus our collaborative efforts. For those critical partners, we stop policing and start capacity building. We invest in their success by sharing our toolkits for business continuity and cybersecurity. A stronger supplier makes us stronger. Most importantly, we make transparency profitable for them. We write data sharing into our contracts and link it to real incentives, better payment terms, preferred supplier status, or longer term commitments. When our suppliers have a commercial reason to be transparent, the entire supply chain wins. Resilience must be designed in, not negotiated after the fact. This means procurement and engineering must co-own supply flexibility decisions from the design stage. Design should allow multi-node sourcing where feasible, modular architectures that enable second sources, and software-defined performance where substitution is possible without hardware changes. On the geographic side, Taiwan concentration remains the industry's single largest systemic risk. The 2.3 trillion in new fab investment through 2032 is aimed partly at regional diversification, but this takes years to materialize. So, current designs must account for today's concentration reality. Finally, NPI processes must include a mandatory Tier 2, Tier 3 risk sign-off for any new materials, process nodes, or proprietary components. Technology is what makes this framework scalable beyond a handful of suppliers. Modern tools use knowledge graphs and large language models to autonomously map multi-tier relationships from unstructured data, news articles, regulatory filings, corporate disclosures. Agentic AI frameworks take this further. Specialized AI agents can now detect disruptions from global event streams, map them to your extended supply network, quantify risk exposure, and recommend alternative sourcing, reducing response times from several days to under 4 minutes. Early warning systems track key risk indicators continuously: financial health, geopolitical shift, quality slippage, labor turnover, flagging vulnerabilities before they manifest as operational crises. This replaces periodic audits with 24/7 continuous surveillance. Two digital capabilities deserve special attention. First, digital control towers, centralized decision hubs that link product design, manufacturing, and procurement data through a seamless digital thread using PLM and ERP systems. These consolidate fundamentally different data streams into unified dashboards, enabling cross-functional teams to make decisions concurrently rather than sequentially, significantly faster than traditional models. Second, digital twins, virtual replicas of your supply chain that allow what-if scenario analysis. You can simulate how a Tier 3 disruption propagates downstream, use Monte Carlo simulations to quantify the bullwhip effects, and optimize inventory buffers before a crisis hits. On the ESG side, AI combined with blockchain creates immutable audit-ready records for Scope 3 emissions compliance. Maturity does not happen overnight. It's a deliberate journey. This 5-level model provides a clear roadmap for progression. Most companies today sit at level 1 or 2, reacting to Tier 2, Tier 3 issues only after they surface through Tier 1 failure, or doing partial ad hoc mapping without formal governance. Level 3 introduces structural reviews and defined ownership. This is where the governance framework we discussed earlier takes hold. Level 4 embeds sub-tier governance into existing processes like NPI reviews and EOL management, making it part of how the business operates, not a separate initiative. Level 5, the target state, uses AI-driven signals and scenario planning for a truly predictive risk management. The framework I presented today is designed to take an organization from level 2 to level 4 with a clear path to level 5. What gets measured gets managed. I recommend tracking two categories of KPIs. Governance effectiveness measures process maturity. What percentage of your critical bombs have Tier 2, Tier 3 mapping completed? What percentage of identified risks have mitigation plans in place? How fast do you respond from the point of detecting a sub-tier signal? And how many production disruptions can be traced back to sub-tier causes? Resilience outcomes measure business impact, avoidance of unplanned last-time buy spend, reduction in EOL surprises that catch the business off guard, lower expedites and premium freight costs, and improve service continuity to your end customers. Together, these KPIs demonstrate both process maturity and bottom line value to leadership. Let me leave you with 5 non-negotiable principles. First, visibility without governance is just data. You need ownership and accountability to turn information into action. Second, engineering and procurement must act as one team on supply risk decisions. Neither function can solve this alone. Third, life cycle risk. EOL, obsolescence, technology sunset deserves equal weight to cost in every supplier decision. Fourth, sub-tier resilience must be designed into products from the earlier stages, not negotiated after the fact. And fifth, at Tier 2 and Tier 3, influence beats control. You govern through collaboration via your Tier 1 partners, not through direct contracts. Together, with this 6-pillar model shown here, this principle form the foundation of a truly resilient semiconductor supply chain. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions. Bye for now.